Hey, I'm Jeff on the Rive team, and I've got a first look at stateful components for you.
Stateful components let you override properties of a component without needing a viewModel instance to support it. It makes designing and iterating much faster.
Let's start by creating a button component. I'm going to add a view model. We call it button view model. I'm going to give this some properties, and I'm going to want to update. This part of the process is going to be exactly the same as what we're familiar with, but we'll see some of the stateful capabilities once we start nesting it. Creating a label, string, and a background color property. I'm going to data bind these. The label will go to the string, the text run in the button. And then for the background color, we'll select the fill of this layout, data bind. When we preview it, we see the initial value set in the string and the background color attached to the fill. Now, when we make this a component, we'll see a new section in the inspector called properties. When we click plus, we'll get the option to add the view model properties for this component. So let's add the label and the background color. And you can see that each one has a choice for it to be an input or an output. The input and output choices mean that when you nest this component and make it a stateful component, you have a choice of updating the values for input properties or reading the values for output properties. So let's see what that looks like. Over on this other artboard, I'm going to hit N and click to choose the artboard. And it will come in as a stateless component.
This is where we would choose a nested instance of a viewModel if we had one available.
But if I switch this to a stateful component, we'll see that choice goes away. And instead, I can see the properties that I defined. So now I have the background color and the label, and I can edit those here directly. Because it's a stateful component, I don't have to use this nested property. So I can actually get rid of this. And if I want to make a copy of this stateful component can have its own values. So it lets you override the properties that you expose when you make it stateful. Stateful components can also be nested. So if I create a card artboard, I'll add some layout to it.
And I'll add a nested component of our button, and we'll make sure that it is stateful.
And I might decide that I want to add another editable property to my original component because I'm noticing that my white text here is hard to read. So I'm going to come back to the button component. I'm going to actually rename it as well. And I will add a new color property to the button view model, call it text color, and I'll bind that to the text. And in my properties on the artboard level, I'll make sure to add text color as an input property. And now, when I come back to my stateful component, I can see I do have the text color choice, and I can choose my override value here. Okay, let's say I've got this card set up the way I like, and I'm ready to start using it. I'll mark it as a component, and we'll notice that I didn't get the properties option here, and that's because I don't have a view model attached, so there are no properties to expose. So let's create a view model for this card, call it card view model. And let's say I want to be able to update the image for each card. I'll add an image property, and I'll make sure to select my image and data bind to that image property. And now, when I come back to the artboard, I do have the properties panel, and I can add the image property. So let's try nesting this one. I'm going to add the card. Looks just like what we set up, and I'm going to turn it into a stateful component. And we'll see here that the image property in the view model was actually blank by default. And so that's what it gets set to when we set it to stateful. But I can come and choose one of the images in my file and get that to reset. So let's make a copy of this one. And for this one, I'll choose a different image. And right now, the only property I have available is the image. I don't have the option to edit the button label or colors like I did when it was nested here. But I can make those options available by creating properties for them in my card view model. And in the stateful component of the button, I can data bind these values to values in the card view model. And since I didn't set default values for them, we see I get the defaults that you get when you create a new property. But now I can choose to add those as well. I can choose all properties and put all of them in there. So now I'll have the option to override those properties as well in my stateful components. Let's add one more. Put these into a layout. And here I might say that maybe the text is too large for what I need. I'll come back to the original component and see it is set quite large. Bring it down. And we can see all the components updating at once. And maybe I also want to add some rounded corners here. Fits a little bit better in the design. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the initial buttons that we added, and we'll set this layout to fill. We'll center these items, and let me add another layout element here. I'll add another string, another text element. Put it inside the layout. I'll give this a default value. Select an option. And then when I click on one of the buttons, I want to update this text. So I'm going to make a string property for that. Call it title. Data bind it. I'm going to set it to initial value at first. So I'm going to take this starting value and make that the default value. And then back in the button component, I'll open the state machine and I'll add a listener with my button layout selected. I'm going to make it a view model change. On click, I want to set the title to the button label from the card view model because my labels are being set on the card components. And now when I play the state machine on my main artboard, I click a button, that string updates. When you make a stateful property an output type, that means it can only be read when it's nested as a component. So let's say we have a slider that is set up to slide between 0 and 100. And we've got properties, one that is a input property so that the color can be changed, and one that's an output property so that the value of the slider can be read. Let's nest that into our layout and we'll make it stateful. And for this, we might choose the same blue color as the rest of our design. And we'll notice that the slider value has a lock next to it and is noted as read only. So we can still interact with the slider, but we can't change this value. But what we could do is put that into a property in our main view model. So if we add another number property, let's call it slider, select our component, we can data bind as a target to source to our slider value. And then when we play our state machine, the value of the slider will get updated in the view model as well. And finally, one other nice thing about stateful components is that input properties can also be keyed on timelines. So if I come into a timeline view, we'll see we get the key symbol next to each of these properties. So I could key the color of the button to go to a lighter shade and then back to its original color on a loop. Declare state machine, we'll see that property is being animated. A lot more you can do with stateful components, but hopefully that gives you a sense of how to get started with setting them up, exposing the properties that you want to make available, and how to modify the instances of your stateful components.